Hey there, welcome in. So today what we're going to be talking about is basic form number 3, which is coils. Prior to today, we've already talked about basic form number 1 and 2, which were slabs and pinch pots. Today will be our final demo regarding basic forms. After this, we'll be talking about more complex forms. In other words, what you can do with these basic forms to create a project. So, just so you have something to look into the future on, some things that are made with coils include this piece. So you might think, wait, how is this made with strands of clay, which are coils, right? Well, if you can see inside, you can see kind of all the rings, how the student built this, which you'll be learning about more in the future, is they took long strands of clay, or coils, as we'll soon see, and they stacked them on top of each other until they created this vase. Then they blended it all smooth and they cut out these really cool details to create somewhat of a texture. So super cool piece. Another way that a student has used coils or strands of clay is like with this piece that was a marine inspired project. You can see that they use these coils to create like tentacles because it's a marine inspired project. So lots of different ways to use them. They can be used to create, they can be used to build with, like the project we just saw here, or coils can be used to decorate with, like the project seen here. So different ways to use them. Today we are just going to focus on how to even make a coil. At a later date, we'll worry more about the application of it. So coils, in essence, are long strands of clay. They can vary in thickness and they can vary in length. It's totally up to you. So what we're going to do now is I'm going to kind of flip around the camera screen and you guys will get to see me make some coils. All right, so now let's go ahead and talk about making a coil. So first step is you want to take your clay and you want to knead and wedge it, as you guys are familiar with. I've already done that with this piece of clay seen here. After that, you want to then form it into a ball, but then put it into like a burrito shape. You know, it's going to be hard to roll this into a long strand of clay if we start with a sphere. So it helps us out a little bit if we get this going into that shape just by kind of forming it at first. So I'm just kind of going to, with my hands, take it from being a round ball shape into more of a burrito. You could do it by hitting it on the table or just kind of squeezing it. So now it's mostly in a burrito shape. If you were to notice a bunch of cracking during this process, then that definitely means that you didn't knead and wedge your clay well enough, and you should probably start from scratch and go re-knead and wedge your clay. So far, I do not see any major cracking, just very minor, tiny cracks, and those are not going to be an issue. At least for now, they aren't. So, next what you're going to be doing is you are going to begin rolling the clay on the table to stretch this out and create a coil. Now, there's a lot of kind of skill, if you will, in doing this. You'll notice as I'm doing this right now, my hands kind of go up and down a lot. They aren't staying level. What that means is I'm not applying even pressure. And what it's creating is a coil that's not perfectly round. See how it's kind of tall-ish? So I'll just go back to kind of tapping it on the table, tapping the high points on the table. Once it seems pretty round again, then I'll begin rolling out the clay, this time with more even pressure. You'll notice too that when you roll out the coil, you want to try to avoid doing too much pressure on your fingers because your fingers aren't very consistent, right? You got soft skin here or soft padding here, and then you have a hard knuckle, soft skin, hard knuckle. So it's not consistent pressure on the coil. So try the best you can to stick with the soft parts of your hand to roll the coil, or at least to apply the most pressure. So it takes a while, so you want to be patient. If you try to apply too much pressure too quickly, you're going to get cracking, it's going to break, it's not going to be an even coil, so it takes a little while. But notice how it's starting to become more coil-like, right? So how thick should your coils be? It's totally up to you. Just remember, and again, I know we haven't talked about the science of this all yet, but just remember that your clay should never be thicker than 3/4 of an inch thick. So that will relate to how thick your coil will be. If you're using it decoratively, then it definitely shouldn't be thicker than 3/4 of an inch. We'll talk about more how thick it should be when you build with it. But you can make these really thin too. Thin, delicate coils make a lot of really beautiful decorations. Okay, so I'm going to fast forward here and there and skip through some parts because otherwise it's a long process of just watching me roll a coil. But anyhow, it's getting to the point now where it's becoming more of what you envision as a coil. However, you also see a lot of cracking along it. Now, before the cracking gets too bad, I want to make sure I address it. So whenever you notice some cracking, make sure you use a rib tool. Works really well. I like these serrated ones with the pokey ends, as well as your slip, or you can use water if you prefer. And you're going to use these things to fix the cracks. So for example, you guys can see all the cracks right here. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to kind of rough up my clay surface, and I'm just going to do a section to show you guys, and then I'm going to do the rest of the coil on my own and fast forward. So I've roughed up one section of the surface to where I can no longer see the cracks in this given spot. It's just all roughed up right there. Next, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a little bit of slip. Clay glue. It's just a mixture of clay and water. And I'm going to apply it in that area. And I'm still using my serrated rib tool to kind of rough it up. What it's doing is that soft slip is filling in all of the gaps, and the serrated rib tool is displacing the clay to make it all nice and even. Looks like this. Now it's like slippy scoring. Then I'm going to take the smooth side of my serrated rib tool, and I'm going to use that to smooth out that area of my coil. Helping to fill in all the gaps. So now you can see this specific section is all smoothed off while the rest is still kind of cracked. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to fix these cracks, and then we will bring it right back. All right, so I've now fixed all the cracks in my coil. So now it looks good as new. It's still a little thicker than I'd like, so I'm going to continue rolling it out by applying some smooth, even pressure. If I ever notice that it seems uneven and my hands go up and down as I roll it, I can always tap down on the points that I feel like are highest, and it should even it out pretty nice for me. Don't wait too long to do that. Make sure you do it as you go. So as I'm rolling this out and it's getting thinner, it's never a bad idea to, instead of roll outwards, to take a break in a moment and roll your coil a little inwards. That might sound kind of counterproductive because it might feel like you're trying to get your coil to be thicker. But realistically, the purpose of rolling inwards every once in a while is to help, to help, realign the clay particles. It's a very similar process or a similar purpose as the kneading and wedging. We're stretching out this clay so much this direction that these clay particles aren't very attached anymore. So every once in a while, just roll it inwards to help reconnect them. And that should help make a nice strong coil. So at this point, this coil is about 3/4 of an inch thick or so. This is as thick as a coil as you can really use. You'll also notice that the ends, they aren't tapered into a nice rounded end, right? They kind of have a hole in the middle. That's natural, and that's going to happen with your coils. However, you don't want to keep that awkward end shape, so you always want to cut it off. Now it's more of a blunt end. It works a little bit better. It's easier to work with. I'm going to do the same thing for the other side. If the length of this coil isn't right for you, you could always cut off more of it to suit you. So I've cut off the ends of my coil. Next, I need to decide what I want to do with these ends, right? Do I want them to just stay blunt-ended, or do I want to do something cool with them? One option that you can do is you can taper the ends down. So right now I'm applying slightly downward pressure on the end of the coil. And what it's going to do is it's going to slowly taper it into a bit of a point. Okay, mine's starting to taper. If I were to be using this for a project, I would definitely be smoothing out all these cracks and fixing them up. But just for sake of your time, I'm gonna go ahead and run with it. So I've tapered the ends now, right? So, you know, that could apply for any purpose that you have for it. One way I'm gonna show you that you can use this is you can use this to create some sort of design. So you very carefully twist the coil around. And now you have like a spiral, if you will. So maybe this could be like the top of a lip for like a vase or something, or you could do something cool with it. Or you could even turn it the other way. My clay is really bearing with me right now. It's getting stretched all sorts of ways. It could be a spiral type design for like the side of a vase or something of that effect. So, you know, lots of stuff you could do with coils. You could even chop it up into littler bits, and maybe there's something specific you want to do with these littler bits of coils. You know, maybe you want to attach them upwards and attach those to something as decoration. So lots of directions you could go with coils. You can even roll them even thinner than this. Again, there's a lot of cracks in mine, but for sake of your time, I'm just gonna kind of roll with it as long as the clay will let me. So here's a much thinner example of a coil. You can get them even thinner than that, but just gives you some ideas of maybe the directions you could go with coils and what you can do with them. So that is all for Section 8, Basic Forms, number 3, Coils. Hope you enjoyed.